Right, in this next screencast we're going to introduce you to the concept of extensions, subsystems and profiles as they relate to JBoss EAP. We will be touching on these in more detail as we progress through the course, so don't worry too much if you don't fully understand or fully grasp what is being explained here. Hopefully this will seed the expectations as you move forward through the class. So, extensions. Extensions are able to be registered in any of our configuration files, so the standalone or the domain mode XML files. All an extension does is register a plugin that could be used by applications within the application server. However, to be used, they would typically need to be registered through the subsystem as well. So in the first place, an extension gets registered as being available for use, and you can see that being done here within the config files. This is the standalone.xml config file, so this is a standalone instance, but it's the same within domain.xml. And this loosely translates to a folder structure that appears in the file system. We flick across to the file system for a second. You'll see here that under the install directory, JBoss EAP6 modules, org, JBoss, AS, clustering, InfiniSpan, and then all modules have a folder called main with a file called module.xml in it. The library itself will be distributed as a jar file, or the plugin itself. Now these plugins provide the functionality that JBoss runs with. As you may recall from earlier screencasts, JBoss uses a very lightweight core and a plugin architecture to provide the additional functionality. So if we go back to our config file here, you see that org, JBoss, AS, clustering, InfiniSpan. So that's how the two align. The registration of an extension simply enables the possibility for this library to be used on this server when it's started up. To actually use the registered extension or plugin, you would need to, within a profile, register the subsystem. And you'll find that effectively for each subsystem that is in use, there'll be an entry in the profile section. So in the standalone config file, we'll discuss this in more detail in the next module, but in the standalone config file there is only one profile, whereas in the domain config files you can have what are known as named profiles, and you can have multiple profiles, in which case you can register the same subsystem multiple times in different profiles, but that'll be covered in more detail further on. For now, the key point is that a subsystem enables the functionality of the plugin module and configures the functionality. And as you can see, for instance, with the logging subsystem here, it's registering a variety of attributes that configure the console handler, for instance, and the periodic rotating file handler, and a number of other attributes, whereas the config admin one here has no configuration items associated with it. That's perfectly valid. The use of this enables the subsystem. It just implies that there is no configuration needed for that subsystem. However, for the subsystem to be used, it does need to be enabled within the profile. And that's pretty much it. In essence, we register an extension. Within a profile, we then register the subsystems that we want to enable against this server instance. Putting an extension in without using it is perfectly valid. However, you cannot use a subsystem without the extension first being registered. And of course, ultimately, the extension needs to point to a module that's deployed in the modules section of the application server. One little thing to be aware of with profiles, the term profile has been used a couple of times. For instance, with the Java EE6 specification, there are two standard profiles. There's the full profile and the web profile. A profile in the context of the application server loosely marries up with that, in that we ship a number of profiles that are meant to align roughly with the full profile and the web profile. But ultimately, because profiles are configurable, you can actually define your own. And a profile is really just the set of activated plugins within a particular server instance. And as I said, standalone only has one, domain has multiple named profiles. And in fact, we ship with 4 default profiles in domain mode, pre-registered in the domain.xml file, whereas in standalone mode, because there is only one profile in standalone mode, we in fact ship, and if I flick across to the configuration folder here, we in fact ship the same profiles in standalone mode. However, we ship those as different configuration files. So there's what amounts to the standard standalone configuration file, the full HA, and the standalone HA. As you might guess, the HA variations include clustering, whereas the standard ones, this is roughly synonymous with the full profile for Java EE6, whereas this is roughly synonymous with the web profile for Java EE6. It's not an exact one-to-one, but certainly roughly equivalent to it. That pretty much covers our initial introduction to your extensions, subsystems and profiles. In the next section you'll have a quiz that will just see if you get a rough idea of how that fits together. You can test your knowledge on that, and that'll be followed by a lab that allows you to play around with the management console and just get your feet wet with playing with the management console. And that will be the end of this unit. So good luck with both of those.